retention. Why is my color not staying? I have so many people that ask the same question. Students, everybody, why is my color not staying? Well, I have put together a few reasons why your color may not be staying in the skin. Just the retention's gone. I have divided up into two different categories. So the first category are clients and the second are artists. So clients, let's start with that. So for clients, number one would be, did your client follow aftercare instructions? So we know that that is super important for our clients to follow the appropriate aftercare. So did your client not jump in a pool or get in a sauna or sweat or any of those things or pick the scabs? Like, did your client actually listen and follow aftercare instructions? Number two, for clients, that would be, is your client a bleeder? Did your client come to you and while you were working on them, they did a lot of bleeding? Well, guess what? If they did do a lot of bleeding, then more than likely, their pigment is not going to stay well. So just think about this. The blood is coming out of the surface and then you're pushing pigment in, so it's just going to counteract each other and not stick. So if you are having an issue with a bleeder, then maybe they're not the best candidate for you. And God forbid they're on blood thinners, which we all know that's a huge no-no. But is your client a bleeder? Another one, does your client have oily skin? We know that, like, if you're doing things like microblading, that's not a good client from sometimes, because same way with bleeding, pigment is being pushed in and the oil glands are coming up and then it's just constantly washing itself out. So it's not going to work well for you. So don't beat yourself up about what a client's skin does and does not do, especially if they have oily skin. I mean, that's tough for all of us. And then also, did your client do any type of thing or put any type of topicals on their skin before coming to you? You know, it's so important to have your clients to fill out their forms for things like their pre-forms for medical history forms and so forth. So you need to make sure that those are filled out and you look through those, because sometimes a lot of our clients just don't think that, no, I can't go get a chemical peel. I can't be using things like any type of age correcting type of products on my skin on a regular basis with things like glycolic and all sorts of anti-aging principles in there, and think that I'm going to get microblading is just going to stick and just be perfect. It doesn't work that way. Absolutely does not. So is your client using those products? And then another one, the last one, is your client on any medication? So if we've gotten rid of all those, but we just look at the surface, what's going on internally? Sometimes we're on different medications that could prevent the possibility of our pigment retaining. So if you have a client that is on cholesterol medication, blood pressure medication, those things actually interact with permanent makeup, and it prevents the longevity of it, and it prevents from it actually retaining into the skin. So we have to be little investigators in finding out, like, what is going on with our client, what did they do, what did they not do. Now after all of that is figured out, like, okay, they did everything they were supposed to do, well, guess what, now we need to look at us. So what did we not do? So these are the things on the artist perspective that could possibly cause your pigment from not staying. So number one, for the artist perspective, would be, did you stretch the skin? I know this seems very like, duh, yeah, I mean, of course you gotta stretch the skin. I mean, if you've ever taken any type of permanent makeup class, they're gonna tell you to stretch the skin. But you would not believe how many people that I get that contact me and they're always saying, I did everything correctly, I did stretch the skin and it still did not stay. Well, I say, okay, well, can you send me a video or send me something of you working? And I promise you that skin is not stretched. Just because you're doing this and you're doing this and you're with them. I mean, no, that skin is not stretched. I'm talking about very tight, taut skin pulled together so your blade or your machine can easily go through. So 3-point stretch, guys, you have to do it. And I'm not talking about like right in the bulb if we're talking about brows and then you're loosening up as you go on the tail. I'm talking about every time you are implanting pigment, you are stretching the skin appropriately from the beginning to the end, like always. You don't lose your stretch. And then another thing, did you saturate long enough? I'm not asking if you saturated, but I'm asking you if you saturated long enough. So some people's version of saturating is taking the pigment, rubbing it on the brows, or no, even worse, they just kind of dab it, dab, place it on the skin, and that's it. You know, that's not gonna do anything. I'm referring to, when I'm talking about saturating the skin, taking that pigment and rubbing it into the skin, going through, saturating it, making sure that those little cuts are being penetrated with nothing but pigment into the skin. And once you get that pigment on there and it's saturated really good, you need to allow it to stay on the skin for closer to your 10-minute mark. You know, and if you have found that you have a client that has had an issue of retention, then maybe you need to keep that pigment saturation on for a little bit longer. But bottom line is you have to saturate, and you have to saturate good. So you need to put that saturation on, allow it to sit, work on the other brow while you're doing that. But if you are a person that, and hopefully you're not speeding through it, but I have seen some artists that are super fast. I mean, you know, don't just try to always just get to the next client. You need to really worry about quality versus quantity. So slow down. Take your time with those brows, so you know if you're slowing down, then guess what? You know that you're getting the appropriate amount of time to actually saturate that brow, okay? So if you have to just do a mental check of like, okay, 10 minutes at least, do that, okay? But definitely make sure you saturate long enough, because a lot of you all, honestly, you're not doing it in and pushing it in there, and then you're not saturating long enough when you do saturate. And then the other thing is, did you even select the correct color in the first place? So that seems like, well, I mean, I did select the correct color, you know. She has blonde hair, I chose blonde color. She has black hair, I chose black. No, I mean, but what about her skin type? You know, we all know about Fitzpatrick's scale. So you would not, or at least I hope you wouldn't, have a client with a darker Fitzpatrick, a Fitzpatrick 4, 5, or 6, and all she happens to have blonde hair. Because it could be possible. Like I could have blonde hair, you know, whatever. But yet and still, I can't take a blonde color and tattoo that on my skin. It's not gonna show. So I have seen it time and time again where you'll have an artist who their main concern is just matching their hair color. And they're not taking into consideration their skin color. So they're looking primarily to match that hair. And when they're doing that, then they're not choosing the correct color. I mean, there's so much that goes on into color theory that, I mean, we can be here all day, but the basics is you have to select the correct color. You need to find a color that's actually going to show up on the skin and work with the undertones and so forth. But I said color theory can go on quite some time. But so make sure you selected the correct color. Another thing is wiping. I teach my students, you go through and you do your first complete pass and you make nice crisp strokes. And after you have gotten to the tail and you moved on, you saturate, and then when you come back, you can wipe. Now, the problem that some artists have is that they'll do a few strokes and they'll wipe. Well, if you are a microblading artist and this is your thing and you're wondering why your color isn't sticking, well, I will tell you, skip everything else. That is the reason why. You cannot do strokes and then wipe and think that your pigment is actually going to stay. You need to do strokes and you need to allow that pigment to soak. I let my strokes sit there wet. And then after I finish my first pass, I then go and saturate. By you just wiping everything off, then you know what you're doing is you're wiping all of your potential retention and everything, because as we know, microblading is superficial. Now if we're talking about something like ombre and nano brows and using a machine, that's different. So you should not have an issue of being able to do your little patterns or your motions with your machine and being able to wipe and having that issue. But this is for my microbladers that are having retention issues. That is going to be the reason why. It's because you are stroking and then wiping. And a lot of times I hear, well, I have to because I can't see where I'm going. Well, that's a whole nother set of issues. If you can't see where you're going, then that may mean you're adding too many strokes, you're not using a adequate blade, you're not holding your tool correctly, where you're leaning to the side and you're smudging, you're not stretching. There's so many different things, but if you are not able to see your work and see your strokes, then that should stop you right there, because now you know you're not doing something correct. Because if your reason for wiping is because you don't see your work, then guess what? You're not doing it the right way. So practice, 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 but practice with skins first, please, ladies and gentlemen, until you perfect it, and then kind of move on to models and then clients. Okay, so yes, so no wiping in between your strokes because you will not get retention. Another thing too is I've seen a lot, and I just is kind of recently bringing this up, even for my students, but when you're doing microblading and you're making your second pass, a lot of times I've seen students and even artists, they don't quite hit the same exact stroke twice. You know, you're just piling strokes up in there, you saturate, you wipe, and then you go through and you just piling more strokes. But are you actually going directly on top of your strokes to see where you went in? And then even when you do that, it's a true art, because a lot of times, a lot of us will not go on top of the stroke, but will be right next to the stroke. So guess what? Our stroke went from being nice, clean, and crisp strokes to thick, blurry strokes because we've like made double strokes. So essentially your strokes have been hit once, not twice. So it is important that we have multiple passes, not too many, but just a couple of passes, so that we are able to open the skin and put in the pigment and allow it to soak in, which goes back to the saturation portion. But make sure that you are hitting your strokes in the correct area, right on top of one another, and you're not just piling in strokes, not seeing what's going on and not knowing what you're doing. So when you are struggling and you're having these issues of color retention, why is my color not staying? Just sit back, look at this video, and see if you can actually say, my client did everything she was supposed to do and I did everything I was supposed to do. If you've done that, then you know what? Congratulations. If you have not, then you need to do something different. But if you haven't, then maybe, or if you have, then maybe it's because you just have not selected the right client and this is not the procedure for them. So if you're microblading them, then maybe they need to do ombre because their skin might be oily or something's going on. But bottom line is we need to look at us as artists and the clients, because all of it has to work in unison. I can't give you perfect saturation with the appropriate amount of time, being in the appropriate spot, if you, the client, are not following aftercare instructions, and vice versa. So it's a two-way street. So don't beat yourself up on what you did not do. Just learn from it. We're all students, and that's what we're here to do, is perfect this art and this thing we call permanent makeup. So let's recap. Okay, talking about retention. So clients, what's wrong with the clients? Did they follow aftercare instructions? Are they bleeders? Do they have oily skin? Are they using products they're not supposed to be using? That could be one. Is your client on any type of medication? Hey, that's it. So clients, that's no issue. Artists, what's our deal? Did we stretch the skin appropriately? Did we saturate long enough? Yes, no? Did we? Possibly, not sure. Did you select the correct color? And did you actually wipe between every stroke, which is a huge no-no? And then also, did you hit that same stroke again, or did you miss it? So those are our things that are going to let us know if our color is going to stay or not. If you did not do all of these, or your client did not do all of this, and guess what, ladies and gentlemen, your color is not going to stay.